of our stop administrator calls. Got it. And I'm really happy to still always be working with also and the STAR project on working with you all, the stop administrators from all over the place. So again, I see that we have several stop administrators. Good to see your faces. Hey, Deb, we have a TA as well, provider on, at least one of all the folks I recognize, so there could be more. So we'll go through and say hi. But again, my name's Robin and I live in Tallahassee, Florida. Happy to be with you. A while back, and by while, I mean decades ago, I was the stop administrator in Florida. So it's really a great joy to still be connecting with this program. It really is. Joy is having internet issues, so on your phone. Good luck with that, Joy. Comcast in our area was playing with several of us today. So may you all be connected. All right, thank you. So let's start though and say hi to one another. And also before we do that, let me introduce the topic. So today we want to talk about documentation, and our experts are, you're looking at them. It's Mary and Courtney from also, we're going to talk about documentation and go into those elements of how you document your work now as you're developing your implementation plan. And really, there's some great tools for you to do that. There are ways for you to do it right now, so you're saving yourself a ton of time and trouble as you're going through this process. And we're going to give you those tips and tricks, I'll say, but it's stuff that you might already know. As ever, when I say too, you're looking at the experts, we're looking at you because you're in the field doing this work and have been doing it for a while. And hey, Gail and friend, she looks like my Lucy. I just fed them downstairs so I won't get Zoom bombed by my cats, but good to see you both there. But we'll talk about documentation. So what we can do as we go through, and documentation is kind of a broad topic. We're going to be talking about the things that are explicitly required, what OVW in your plan requires that you do. We're going to be talking about shortcuts or ways that we can give you to make that planning process and that documentation process easier. And if you've got any hints of what you have been doing and how you've been using any of these tools or have come up with something on your own, we look forward to hearing from you as well, because we're all teachers and we're all students. So let's go around the Zoom room and say hi. If you could check in, give us your name and the state you're in and what you do. And it looks like we have 2 TA providers on today, at least. So let's go ahead and say hey, but let's start off with the also team, if you will. Just say hi and let's get our program rolling.
Hey everybody, I'm Mary Seifman with the Also STAR project, and I'm going to pass it over to Courtney.
Hi, my name is Courtney Katoskis, and I am with the Also STAR project as well.
Hi, and I'm Marisol Giroux, the manager at Also, and I am also part of the STAR team.
You're also part of Also. I know it's so hard not to say that. So let's start. I'm going to just ask you all to introduce. I'll go along with how you're happening to appear on the grid here. So Lindsay, would you like to say hey?
Hi, yes, I am with North Carolina's Governor's Crime Commission. I'm actually one of their VOCA administrators. Our VAWA stop administrator is actually leaving at the end of this month. So stepping in for her to be able to assist in our stop IP and just kind of learn what I can. But thank you.
Okay, great. And have you been working on the implementation plan so far with her?
We've been working on just kind of getting the plan for the plan together, basically, and just making sure we have everything that we will need. Introducing us to Courtney. We met last week and just kind of getting an idea of what our resources are and what our direction is so that we can officially start drafting.
Okay. Having a plan to plan is a really important thing. That's great. Okay.
Hey, Robin, I'll jump right in there with Lindsay. I work with her. I'm one of the VOCA planners at the Governor's Crime Commission in North Carolina as well. And we're having a great time learning everything that's going on. I'm very happy to join this meeting. I'm sorry I could not turn on my camera. I left the office, so I was in transition from picking up a middle schooler and an elementary school student, and then taking a puppy out to go to the bathroom. So I'm so sorry I couldn't turn on my camera. I'm a bit disheveled right now, but
Okay.
settling.
Well, we've got your partner here, Dawn, and we see her. And thank you for joining us as you can. That's great. That's great. I want to say anybody else from North Carolina, but I don't think there is. I think we're okay. We got our North Carolina contingent. All right, Catherine. Hi. Why don't you let us know where you're from? California, right? And
Yes, Catherine from
good to s-
California with CalES. I love the fact that we're going over documentation right now. I really, really like the Excel workbook. I've been playing around with it for a while to make it my own, of course, and to see what's working. I added a different, it already had pre-populated drop boxes, which was really cool. So I added a few extra ones to correlate with what we're doing in our implementation plan. So it's been super helpful and very useful.
Okay, great. It's excellent to hear that because we're going to put that Excel spreadsheet up for everybody to see, and maybe you can pipe up and let us know how you've made it your own. That's
Will
excellent.
do. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And hey, Victoria, welcome. Would you like to check in? It looks like you're a TA provider, right?
That's correct, Robin. So hi, everyone. My name is Victoria Riekers. I use she, her pronouns, and I am with the Sexual Violence Justice Institute. So I am one of the TA providers today, and I provide technical assistance to STOP administrators related to the 20% sexual assault set aside, especially focused on things like systems change and sexual assault response teams. So I just started at the Sexual Violence Justice Institute back in June, and Mary and Courtney were kind enough to invite me to attend the STOP TA clinics. So this is my first clinic, so thank you.
Great. Welcome. I'm so glad you could join us. Terrific. Okay. Next, Gail Krieger. Can I ask you to say hey? You and your friend.
Yeah, hi, I'm Gail Krieger. This is my cat Muffin, who has radar for when I get out of conference call, wants to come sit on my lap. So I'm from Michigan. I work with Debbie Kane, who's our STOP administrator. But I've been overseeing our STOP planning process this year. I was all geared up to do it last year, and I had my plans for my plans, and then it all went on hold when they gave us an extra year with the STOP plan. So we just started re-engaging in our planning process probably last January. So we're, halfway through it right now, I would think.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, good luck. And yeah, we'll talk about all those kinds of things. Deb DeBear just had to jump off, and she's with NNEDV, and she can introduce when she comes back. So Joy, I know I don't see you, but can you hear us, and can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. Hi, Joy Jones with Mississippi State Department of Health. I am the STOP and SASP administrator.
Okay, great, great. And we see you might be trying to connect otherwise. I see two Joy Joneses, and there can't be two of, well, there could be two of you.
Well, let me go. That's where I was trying on my computer. Let me go turn that part off because it keeps telling me that my Zoom on my computer is not responding.
Okay.
So I'll turn that off now.
All right. Okay. Okay, cool. That's great. All right. Let's go down to Bill from New York. Hi, Bill. It's been a few weeks since we've seen you.
Hi, how's everything going?
Good.
Good. Yeah, I'm Bill Schaefer with New York State. I'm the STOP and SASP administrator here, and we're in the middle of our planning process.
Okay, great, great. And yeah, and any tips you have on documentation or any preliminary thoughts? I've meant to ask that of the others, but anything that comes to mind for you there?
Save everything.
Save everything. All right. Yes.
But the toolkit is actually really helpful in that regard. The different new things that you guys have developed over the years, and that just makes it easier and easier each time we do it.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Yeah, the save everything / CYA. I don't know. It just like both of those things kind of come together sometimes. Laura Kwasny, South Dakota. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Robin. Laura Kwasny, South Dakota. I am a co-administrator. We our program director, Cora, and I typically handle most of our grants, VOCA, FIPSA, STOP, and SASP. We are in the thick of, well, I should say, I'm trying to get a jump on our draft of our plan. I go on maternity leave in the next probably 6 weeks. So told her I would try and have the draft to her before that, so she's not trying to pick up where I left off in drafting. So I think this is great timing to hear how everyone else is kind of moving through their process as well.
Okay,
And
great, great.
This is our first year, so I don't have any helpful hints.
Okay, well, you'll get some, I'm sure. And by the way, thank you for everybody too for having your videos on. Or if you can keep it on, that's great, Laura. If you can't understand, Rochelle, you've just kind of rearranged on my screen. You want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Rochelle Wallace from Alabama, and I'm the STOP and SAS program manager. I'm just helping my program supervisor with the implementation plan.
Okay, great, great. Well, wonderful to see you again. Good to have you on. Okay, we have somebody else with a 207 area code on by phone. Would you like to say hi and identify yourself?
Hey everyone, this is Julia Bergeron Smith. I'm calling in from Maine, and I am not Maine's STOP administrator, but they are contracting with me and my colleague to help gather data for Maine's STOP implementation plan.
Okay, and you said your first name was Julia?
Julia, yes.
Okay, Julia. Well, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. All right, well, let me start off right away with our, Deb DeBar, you're back. Would you like to say hey?
Sure. Yep. Sorry about that internet issue, but I'm back. I'm just proud I troubleshooted it, and here I am with an NEDP, one of the TA providers who work with the coalitions.
Great, great. Good to have you. Yeah, it does feel good when things like that come together. All right, so what I'd like to do right now is ask Mary and Courtney to sort of get us started on this whole concept of the importance of documentation. What was Congress thinking? What is OVW thinking about it? And how we can move forward with it. And we'll go into some details after they finish that introduction. Okay, so let me turn it over to you, Mary.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. So you all, as you know, are required and asked to provide a whole lot of data and documentation, a lot of background information as you are submitting your application, as part of your application, as part of your plan. And then once you've received your award, you're asked for a whole lot of data in the form of your STOP administrator reports and your sub-grantee reports. So there's just a whole lot. I mean, this is all because of, you all know this, but it's all because of accountability. You're accountable, and I wish I could draw you on sort of a flow chart right now, but state agencies are accountable to OVW, but that's because OVW is accountable to Congress to provide them with the information that Congress has set forth in VAWA, information that they need so that they can be assured that the funding that they're authorizing, that they're appropriating, is going to the places that it was intended to go to, that it supports the needs that were that are really behind the purposes for the enaction of VAWA. So all of those hearings that were held in, way back in 1992 and 1993, where Congress listened to testimony from survivors, from advocates, from those who serve survivors, that really laid out the reasons why we needed a federal act to help with a more seamless safety net within states and then among the states, so that when survivors need to move about, they can do so more safely. So, I mean, this is all about accountability. So you're accountable to OVW, OVW is accountable to Congress. Congress is accountable back to the states that we're, spending our tax dollars wisely in ways that all of the constituents who support those reps and those senators can support too. And then you're accountable back to your state constituents as well. So it's just sort of a circle of accountability, and we're all accountable to each other as we put together gather the data, put together the documentation, all of that stuff that you're putting into your, your workbooks, your spreadsheets. That's all about being accountable ultimately to ourselves and really to Congress, and then back to ourselves as residents of the states that we live in and territories. So I thought what we would do is just look at that whole array of data and documentation that you're required to provide. We're not going to focus really so much on the musky, the reporting stuff that you have to submit once you have an award, but all the pre-award stuff, all of the data, all of the information that you either have to submit with your implementation plan or that you have to save as backup. Like Bill says, save it all just in case. It's the just in case information that is the proof. It's the evidence that you did your job, that you did everything that you said you did. So just in case someone asks. And sometimes they do. So I'm going to try to successfully share my screen. I've got a lot of windows open and several monitors, so it's always kind of a guessing game here. So I hope you can see this. This is, I think, sort of the best place that has kind of a consolidated list of the data and documentation that you have to provide as part of your implementation plan, or which is now the bulk of your STOP application for funds. It used to have to be submitted after your application. Now it's actually, it comprises the majority of your STOP application. So, and this is also contained, of course, in the OVW implementation plan checklist, but it's just sort of kind of all over the place in that checklist. And here is kind of a complete list. By the way, this is in the most recently available report to Congress about the STOP formula grant program. So again, about accountability, this is the report to Congress that shows that OVW puts together to show that they've done their jobs in executing their part of the STOP program. So getting their funding to you, getting information back from you, showing that it's effective, showing that it's being used according to the statutory plan, the statutory strategy, and what's required. So that is all to say that, oh, sorry, here's the list. The first is, of course, you know this because we talk about this all the time, documentation from each member of the implementation planning process that they participated in the process. So that this would be the stuff that shows that you have a planning committee that is comprised of all of those required entities that are set forth in VAWA, but it's also that larger consultation. So beyond the committee, everyone else. So that would be, for example, if there are tribes that are tribal governments that are located in your state, it would be all of those tribal governments, both federally recognized and state recognized. It would be, so just everyone else beyond that sort of core team that works with you on your plan. So, and we'll talk about that workbook that we hope helps you organize all of those folks and your contacts with them. And then, okay, so the second dot point here, the documentation from prosecution, law enforcement, court, and victim service programs that demonstrate the need for grant funds, how they intend to use the funds, the expected results, and the demographic characteristics of the populations to be served. These are those letters that have kind of changed over the years. If you've been around, like Bill has, I know, like you know that there are letters that have to be submitted, and that's normally how this requirement is met. We'll talk about that as well. The third dot point is how the state will then ensure that subgrantees, so those that apply to you for funds, are consulting with victim service providers while they're putting together their own applications. And I think this is one of those points that is, I don't know, it just kind of becomes, it's not the central topic of conversation, I think. It hasn't been in recent years, but this is super important. And this applies to law enforcement, prosecution, and courts applications. And they have to be involved with advocates, have to be talking with them about what works best. So we can talk about that too. And then you're all familiar with the fourth point, the demographic data. I mean, just generally that census data, and then the demographic data on underserved populations and where they're located within the state. This next point isn't so much about data and documentation, but you are going to have to show that you understand where the populations and the victim services are located so that you can justify and explain your grant making strategy. So how are you equitably distributing your funds based on who lives where, what the needs are in which locations, and also those service, the programs and their service areas and population density and different geographic sizes, so, or different population sizes in different areas of your state. And then you also have to show some data about domestic violence homicides too. So that's in that sort of first part of data that's required in your implementation plan. So those are the things that we will talk about, and a couple of other points as well today. But those are all of the sort of main data and documentation pieces. And we can talk about how you go about getting that information and where you can kind of store it, where you can keep it, what you have to submit to OVW and what you don't have to submit, because you don't have to give them everything. And then we'd like to hear from you guys as well about what works for you. Like Catherine, that's great to hear that you're modifying the workbook to make it suit your needs. And that's exactly what it was intended for. It's, you know, it's not meant to be, you know, used just sort of as is. And I'm really glad to hear that you're doing what you want with it too, to make it work. I guess the final thing, you know, in terms of accountability, I mentioned all of those different players, all of the people who need information about what you're doing and want to know if you're doing it right. The final group of people that I think we are all accountable always to in our jobs are our successors. And so the folks that take your job when you ultimately leave your job and retire or move on to another position, but you want to leave them something that shows them how to do this. So, I mean, some of you here are like Lindsay, I know you're sort of taking this on, and Dawn is as well. And you're really, really lucky to have someone who's walking you through those steps when, you know, as she's about to leave and go somewhere else. That's so considerate. And it's also so important for the processes in your state, and just being able to carry forward and not try to, you know, figure out how was this done? What did they do last time? And how did I can't figure out who were the people on the planning committee, and what are the relationships there, and who else do I need to invite, and where did everybody leave off? And the fact that you don't have to do that, Lindsay and Dawn, is great. But I know that there are a lot of folks who've stepped into these positions that have had to figure it out. So just accountability to those who come after us, and, you know, helping them to be set up for success so that they can do a better job for the state. Okay, so I know that Courtney is going to show us some of the different pieces related to that list I showed you, starting with, I think, the implementation plan committee and the larger consultation too, and how you can go about figuring out, first of all, which is which, and how to save yourself some headaches and store that information for yourself and your successors so that you can one, have something to show OVW if you're asked, and just keep it all straight for yourselves and stay organized.
And I wanted to also just reiterate, if you have any questions as we go forward, feel free to put them in the chat, or feel free to ask them. Just unmute yourself. It's hard for me if the screen is being shared to see everybody. But we definitely want to hear from you if you have any questions about anything that we're talking about. Okay, thanks.
So I'm going to share my screen now and just show you a little bit more information about documentation in relation to like your planning committee, and then also who the others that you do consult with. So can you all see my screen? Okay.
You
So
could
this is-
enlarge it, maybe just enlarge it.
oh, yeah.
a tiny bit.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is the OBW implementation planning checklist, which I can also put just the link in the chat now for us actually too, so you all have it. But this is where you'll find a list of like who needs to be a member of your planning committee, and also like the required documentation related to their participation in your planning committee. So as you can see, and all of this information as to like who is required and like who can be part of your larger consultation, but not necessarily your planning committee, is also in the VAWA regulations along with the documentation. But so as part of your planning committee, you need participation from the state sexual assault and domestic violence coalitions, the dual coalition, law enforcement, prosecution, courts, representatives from tribes, population-specific organizations, or like other individuals or entities if they're relevant. And so for this, because this is the planning committee and this requires documentation, there's also this planning participation form, which you can actually turn in with your implementation plan. And this is also on our website, which I can actually just put the link in the chat for you also now.
And actually,
but-
while Courtney's doing that, I'll just mention that you don't have to use this particular form. You could, like create your own. This particular form, it was created based on an earlier form that I think like Ava had developed. So this is the revised version of that form. You actually do have to turn in something, whether it's this form or something else that provides this information. So this is really tailor-made for those questions that OBW is asking you to answer when you submit your plan. So not only are you writing a narrative in your implementation plan and providing lists and probably appendices with the names of the individuals and the entities they represent that participated as part of the planning committee, but they also want to know this stuff here too, like, showing that, for example, you not only sent a draft plan. I'm having trouble seeing this even with sending a draft plan to your implementation planning committee members, but that you gave them adequate notice too. So like sending it to them the day before or 3 days before is not adequate. I think OBW would probably question that. And, one of the things that one of the most important things I think that we want to do is make sure that you can get your plan approved. We want you to put together a really good plan, a comprehensive plan, a plan that meets the needs, addresses gaps, all of that. And we also want you to get your plan accepted so that you can draw down your funds and do the work that you intend to do too. So this form, this discussion, all of this is aimed at helping you get your stuff approved. So, and so this form helps you do that too. So if you use this form and if you take a look at it beforehand so that you know what it is you're asking your planning committee members to verify, then you'll know what it is you have to build into your timeline too. So looking at, whoops, so sorry about that. So looking at the date that you want to send your draft plan to your committee members, for example, helps you plan ahead, and you know that you need a very, very, very good draft finished at least a month before you want comments back from your planning committee members too. So that might take a kind of a big, deep cut out of your timeline. If you're thinking right now that you only need like a week or so, or maybe if you didn't know you needed to actually document the fact that you sent a draft to your committee members. So that takes a lot of time. So a month is a long review period, but I think we put this form together in collaboration with OBW. So I would say they want a month. They want you to be able to say that you gave everybody about a month. So that's just one example. And then you're also going to want to build in time for incorporation of comments. Or if somebody has a big, there might be some big issue that comes up when like, hey, where are my comments? I emphasize this in these meetings that this particular issue is super important and I don't see it here. So how you're going to need time to address that and have a conversation with those folks and try to figure out how you can make this work and represent the ideas and the information and the input that you asked for and then got. So, and you're also going to have to show if you don't address it in your plan, why not? And what are the reasons for that? So you have to provide an adequate justification for your lack of representation of input that you receive, something significant, that is. So sorry, Courtney, I didn't mean to like take over your discussion, but
no, that's all right.
And a question did come in from Gail. Do we know the final deadline for stop plan submission yet?
Oh, no, we don't know that at all yet. And I mean, our guess is, and OVW doesn't always know this either. I mean, lots of it is dependent on the budget and then there's the development of the solicitation and getting input from, gosh, like up the flagpole at the Department of Justice sometimes too. So these things take time. OVW, it's not like they're keeping this information from us. They just don't know at this point. And I mean, we've always been saying like, it's probably the first quarter of 2022. And so, nobody said that's wrong. So we're continuing to say it's probably going to be like the first quarter, but it could be after, it could be before. Yeah, it probably won't be before. It probably wouldn't be.
And also too, this is related to what Mary was saying about accountability. And it's this piece of too, accountability to the survivors, because you do have to turn in a narrative of major concerns that were raised and whether you chose to address them, or if you didn't choose to address them, why not? And even here in this form, people who participated in your planning committee can say whether or not they had concerns with the plan. And that isn't about you. That's not to be punitive towards you. But it's really, if there's a lot of issues or a lot of barriers in the state, this data and information is going to Congress. And so it's important for them to be able to see this. So back to the implementation plan. So that form can be used for all of those in your planning committee. But then in terms of your larger consultation, so this is for your larger consultation, which is people who are not involved in your planning committee. And you do have to provide a summary of how they participated, or just what concerns were raised when you did consult with them. And there is also, this is kind of where the workbook comes in for both those part of your planning committee and also those just part of the larger consultation. So I'm going to show you all the workbook now. In a little bit, I can put the link in the chat, but they are Excel spreadsheets, so that's why it's like this right now. But this is really helpful in keeping you organized. Again, you don't have to use this, or you can take it and kind of make it your own. But it's just a way to kind of keep track of everybody that you have. Oh, sorry, were you going to say something, Mary?
I would just for the new folks who are just coming on, just to what the title is of this, and we can, I don't know if you put the link into the chat. If you didn't, I can, where you can find it on our website too. And this is just, it's a whole workbook that was just designed to help you track your data, help you track your contacts, and Courtney will walk through it. But I'll put the link into the chat.
Yeah, so you can say their name and then the category. So this one is for those who are part of your planning committee. So these drop down, which I don't know if you all can see it, but the drop down menu is going to say State Sexual Assault Coalition, Domestic Violence Coalition, things like that. So you can just pre-select it. Or if it's another entity type, you can also put it here. You can say whether they're a part of your planning committee or not, how you reached out to them, or if maybe you emailed and that wasn't successful, but you had their number and you called, you can also say that. And then you can also track when you contacted them, the date, if you had to try multiple times, if they responded, when they responded. And then two, as we get over to kind of this side, just the different participation opportunities. So whether that was, you know, a larger planning committee meeting, or if it was just a more like individual opportunity for them to like express their concerns, or even like the reviewing of the plan itself, then you can put all of that in here. And then sorry, let me scroll all the way over. Can also put in any sort of like comments or concerns that they had about the draft of your implementation plan, when they like received the plan, when they sent it back. So it's really like, it just kind of houses everything. You can even right here put their contact information, like their address, phone number, email. So it's just a really nice place to have it all just kind of like wrapped up very nicely. And then along with, so planning committees, your planning committee has to have like representation from tribes, but also aside from that, you also do need to consult with tribes. And so this form can be for keeping all of your contacts when working with tribes organized. And this also can be if they're like a member of your planning committee or part of your consultation separately. And it's sort of the same thing of like how you reached out to them, when you reached out to them, if you got a response, things like that. And then also if they have any recommendations for anyone who might be like a valuable addition to your planning committee. And then this next sheet, so let me zoom in for that for sure. Oops. Okay. So this is going to be about data, because also data is part of your documentation. So here is how you can like identify how you identify underserved populations in your state. And so here is kind of more like from the US Census data that you can keep track of. But you know, we always talk about how you want to have a more, just a more representative, you just want to have more representative data than just the census data alone. So there's other, like there's space to put other information and where you got the data. Again, also like how you identified underserved populations. And two, we have a list of like a glossary of terms if you do need the definition of like what an underserved versus population specific or culturally specific organization is. So we can put that in the chat too. And then this last sheet is actually where you can change the drop-down values. So I believe that's what Catherine is probably using. So yes, that is the workbook. And again, you're not required to use it at all. But it even can just be like a shell for you in terms of, you know, keeping track. I know we all have so much on our plate constantly. And so I think to have something that's all in one place and, you know, all the information that you need can be very helpful.
That's great, Courtney. And one of the things that I'd like to know from Catherine too. Mary, sorry, Mary, were you going to say something?
Oh no, go ahead. I'll hop in with it later. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. So Catherine, now that we've kind of taken a little walk through the worksheets, what have you done to kind of make these your own?
I've adjusted some of the drop downs to include more specific to ours. Obviously, we have an LGBT representative and a few other representatives that I wanted to make sure that they were highlighted versus other. When I started doing other, it just became other. And so that's how it looked a little better. And then I also did some additional information pertaining to the tribe contacts and pre-populating those to make sure we've got everybody on our list, and then double checking. And then we did a secondary one on some of them that we weren't 100% sure on. I know that sounds bad, but just wanted to make sure we actually did contact them. And so if we weren't hearing from one person, we wanted to make sure we got it from another person during that process.
Great.
So it's great. I love that Excel spreadsheet. It's been really helpful. It's easy to manage. And it just basically has everything that I can think of. We obviously have the emails as backup to the spreadsheet, just in case.
I was just going to ask you about backup because that's part of it too, isn't it? And you never know when a data set is going to get wiped out, or you're going to lose something, or someone's going to change, and empty, your inbox unbeknownst to you one day. So, so kind of keeping data in a couple of different places and having backup is really smart. Plus, I don't know if you all, they say Florida's the sunshine state when it comes to public records, but we have to keep all this stuff. I mean, it is a requirement of state law. And so having it organized and having it sort of in a place where you can be compliant with your sunshine laws, as well as, your public records laws, so that if you do need to pull up something, it's going to be helpful to you and your team. So that's great. Okay, Mary, you're going to go back on something there?
Oh, so just, I think Courtney said this, but I just wanted to reemphasize that the workbooks, those sheets, they do not have to be turned into OVW. I think I would just, even if you feel like you really want to, I would probably just hold on to it and just keep it, and then you can always refer back to it. So that was the first thing. And then I also wanted to just point something out about the sheet that relates to your consultation with tribes too. There are a lot of columns in that sheet. I realize it's kind of massive, and I just wanted to explain maybe a couple of things that you might have questions about. The first is, I don't know if Courtney, if you have that. Yeah, thank you. So there's one column where it says like initial contact or something like that. Yeah. So when I put this sheet together, it's been several years since then, but knowing that many times STOP administrators were starting from scratch, especially when they were first required by Congress to consult, coordinate and consult with all of the tribes, state and federally recognized within the state. They're often starting from scratch if there isn't a relationship there. So you will, sometimes begin by reaching out to a contact who, may not be within the tribal government, might be a tribal member, might be someone who sits on the state commission related to Indian affairs or something like that. So it's sort of a starting place, like a placeholder, and that person may then help you get in touch with the tribal chairperson or someone on tribal council who can be your contact. So I just wanted to explain that. And then there's another column related to advocacy, or this question here, does initial contact represent a shelter or serve as a victim advocate? This column we placed in here based on the input of a tribal TA provider who said, yes, of course, you have to consult and coordinate with your tribal governments, with the tribal governments, and they, you need to get their input. But you also, in terms of substantive input, if you want to hear more about how it's really going for survivors and their children and families, probably talking with someone who is an advocate or who works in a direct service program, like, who does Head Start or something like that. You also want to talk to those folks within tribe because they might also have be sort of more boots on the ground idea of how it's going. So, with smaller tribes, maybe the, chairperson or the chief would have that information. But so anyway, it's just a place for that too, because you want both kinds of input. You want the sign off and you want the input of the sovereign leader, and also to hear what's going on in terms of individual survivors' lives. So I think that was mainly it, but there's just like lots of places to provide, to input your contact attempts. And I know that it can be sort of slow going, especially if you're just starting out. And I know that some of you at this clinic are, and it's new, and it's going to be new for the tribes to hear from you, and it's a new process for you as well. And it's just going to be sort of baby steps. So that's why you can indicate your, the dates, the methods, like try different things. And not only is it good practice and it's good in relationship building too, but it's, you know, again, you're showing that you're doing your due diligence, you're documenting your efforts here. And it's not just so that you can say, yeah, I did it, check the box and look at all the things I did. But I mean, yeah, you have to do that too. So this is the place to do it. And then the last thing that just occurred to me, when Catherine, you were talking, I realized that some of you might be doing survivor focus groups or getting input from individual survivors. And that's important and that's encouraged. And the regulations actually speak to that. It's not required, but you know, advocates are, you know, they really are the voice of survivors in your state. But sometimes you do want to get individual survivors to participate and tell you directly about their experiences. And if you're doing that sort of thing, I would just encourage you to keep records of those focus groups probably in another place. You want to maintain confidentiality. You don't want to put any personally identifying information in a sheet that might be shared with someone at some point. So, I mean, you probably all have processes and protocols for keeping stuff kind of locked and separate, but just like probably don't put it here, especially if you're going to be sending it around or other folks are going to see it, or it's in a shared drive or something like that. So that was it. Those are my thoughts.
You know, the other thing that occurs to me, and maybe you all can talk about this, is that since COVID and so much of the response is going to be via Zoom or other kinds of remote meetings or, you know, phone calls and even a Zoom call with a number of people, there are ways you can take screenshots of people who've participated on Zoom calls. There's a way you can ask everybody when they attend a Zoom call to just sign in. Well, you'll have their attendance records. You can also get copies of the chats in a Zoom call that you can download and use later to kind of fill out some of the information in these forms, or to also just inform directly things that are being considered in terms of priority or data or things you want to follow up on. So in this time of COVID, you know, we normally talk about things like, you know, a sign-in roster or people who've been face-to-face, but there's other ways that we can do that now, and to pay attention to the technology and remember, you know, you can record these things and then go back and take whatever notes you need as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, Robin. So the regulations, which I actually encourage you all to read, and I know that sounds like it sounds very boring, but I mean, it is really kind of essential reading if you're a stop administrator. And we can put the citation and the link to those into the chat as well. But these regulations were published, the final version, in the fall of 2016, and that was way before all of this happened, and way before we were doing Zoom calls on a regular basis. So it does speak to documentation of consultation in there, and it provides more details that you won't see in the solicitation and you won't see it in VAWA itself. But this is the sort of granular stuff. And the section that I'm speaking about is section 90.12, and this is in the Federal Register. And again, we'll put the link into the chat, but it's section C or subsection C, documentation of consultation. It says that states must retain all of the following documentation, but are not required to submit it to OVW as part of the implementation plan. And that's all that stuff that's like in this workbook here. But it doesn't say anything about Zoom meetings. So it talks about phone meetings, it talks about in-person meetings, it talks about webinars, but it doesn't talk about places like this where you can see people's faces. The only thing I would, and Robin's right, screenshots of everybody who's in your group, that's a good idea. Just make sure everybody puts their name, their correct name, and like not a phone number or something like that. And then also the entity or that they are associated with as well. Like, you know, you want to make sure it shows too in a picture, so that if you have to show it, you know, those are all the people that you put into your list in the narrative, and if anybody wants to see it. So yeah, but the regs don't include Zoom stuff.
That's right. We've got to adapt to the times. Boy, this Federal Register is an eye test to try to read this, Courtney. So we can probably not screen share on that. So what else did you want to talk about, Courtney and Mary? Were you going to talk about? I know in our prep we talked a little bit about RPE, VOCA, and your process is when you've reached out to some of the other entities in your state, right? You're going to have to document that you've done some consulting with them about what is their VOCA plan? Does it cover any of the populations you're seeking to support in your implementation plan, for example?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are no, I mean, you have to report, like, for example, you talked about consultation with the administrators of FIPSA, VOCA, and RPE plans. And in some cases, there isn't like a plan like the STOP plan here. But I mean, you have to show that you did consult and you did have conversations about, and then what came about as a result of those discussions too. So not just we got together and we talked. You have to say how it, I believe the language is something like how it impacted this plan, how it affected the plan that you put together. So something like we discussed the use of the sexual assault set aside in coordination with the RPE funds. We looked at the gaps, like what is not being covered with the current funding grant making strategies with, you know, all of those grant programs. And here's what we decided to do as a result. So we're funding these services in STOP in order to cover some of the gaps that are left after those funding programs have distributed their dollars too. So we are showing that you are working together in coordination. I think that's what OVW would say that they would want to see, something like that. I mean, I think they've been sort of lenient about that language. That's not been the thrust of some of their comments and questions that I've seen in the past. That it doesn't mean that it couldn't be. And lots of times what I've seen in plans is just, it's sort of very general, like, yeah, we got together, and it doesn't really speak to the details about so what happened when you did get together and what did you decide? And the intention here, I think, is that if you're looking at your funding programs that are relevant, that are related to one another, and putting them together like there aren't, you know, so that the pieces fit together and there aren't these, you know, they're not sort of operating in silos by themselves and without regard to what the other funding streams are doing. And some of you are those same people, so you do consult with yourself, and but in other cases you're going to have to talk to your State Department of Health about RPE and figure it out too. And it's a good opportunity. But anyway, it's mostly narrative for that particular kind of coordination. A lot of this is narrative. I mean, you're just writing about how what came about and what was the important and significant input that you received as a result of this consultation. But so there's no backup data that's required for that really, other than, I mean, I think you probably should just keep track of your emails, record that stuff too. You might even want to create another sheet, like another tab in that workbook that says, and maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll just add a tab to speak to FIPSA, VOCA, RPE, and SAS. I mean, SAS consultation isn't required, but you know, why not? And as many of you fulfill that role as well too. So we could easily add a tab to that sheet and, you know, reissue that too. Just realize that for some reason we don't have dual coalitions in that drop down for entity type. I don't know why that got left off, but we'll have to add that as well. So, and if there are other things that you think would help you keep track of all of this too, let us know and we can try to create it or revise what we have so that we can help you meet your needs, because it's all evolving right now too. Like something related to all these remote meetings, we could do something with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's great. And it might be a helpful thing to have, because if you name a giant need in your plan and you're not funding it, there's a good reason it might not be funded, because it's being covered by VOCA or one of these other funding sources, if there's something. So it's always good to be able to explain and include as much information that's relevant to your priorities as possible. Well, we've got 5 minutes left. Let me open up the floor to any questions or comments. What do you all think? What are you all doing? And again, this is stuff you can be doing right now. Catherine mentioned how she's adapted the form and going through and filling it out. But even sending the participation form to your planning team members now, so they know that they're going to have to do it. They can keep it handy. You can put it on the agenda at every meeting that you have, so people are aware of it. They can start filling that out and collecting that data. Any questions anybody has? Any comments? Well, it looks like we've shared a lot of great resources today. Mary, and Courtney, would you like to add anything to the discussion? We're just cresting on the end of our hour. I always can't believe how fast this hour goes by. But is there something?
I felt like there was so much we wanted to talk about, and now the hour is over and we haven't gotten to all of it. So maybe we need to do like a part 2 about documentation. And we didn't talk about the letters, I know for sure. We didn't talk about documenting how your data on underserved populations and how you can do that, and maybe even how you can depict that in your plan as well, like sort of overlaid with victim services and your current funds and where they're going, all of that stuff too. I'd love to hear from you all too about your ideas and your thoughts about how you could document that in your plan too.
Yeah, that would
get to.
Yeah, I know. And I'm thinking we should do it just as a little commercial. I see, Gail, you've got your hand up, but let me mention that our next one of these is going to be October 4. So let's think about doing that. Let's do a part 2. Does that sound good, everybody? That way we can keep the flow going. Thumbs up, nods. Yeah. So I think we have our October 4 program, Mary and Courtney. So great. Gail.
Hi. So one of the things we struggle with is we do ongoing consultation. So like over the last 4 years, we have agency directors meetings. We're always talking about how funding process works. We meet with tribal council annually, which we talk with all the tribal leaders about, us as a funder and their goals. And we kind of document that as we go, but we're not using the formal tools like this. Is it okay within the narrative, do you think, just to document these things that we do on a regular basis? Every year we do these like couple of things with some of our different constituency groups.
I mean, I can't speak for OPW, but probably you can use whatever method is going to work for you, as long as it captures all that info that you or your successor, your colleagues can interpret and provide to OPW that show everything it is that you want to and need to show. So yeah, you can use whatever works for you. I mean, as long as it exactly fits those requirements. I mean, sometimes when there are like advisory committees or boards that have some of the entities that you're required to meet with or consult with, but not all, like that's not going to work. I know that's not your question, Gail, but I just thought I'd throw that in there too, because sometimes there are statutorily mandated, prescribed entities or boards that that are sort of operate as a planning committee, but that aren't quite exactly what is described as a planning committee in VAWA. So I would just Yeah,
I mean, we're having our formal planning committee that meets all of the statutory requirements, but part of it's like we come in and we do formal stop planning, before the stop planning, we make sure we hit all the consultation people and all the coordination people and our planning committee. But then I feel like, well, we've been doing this in an ongoing way for the last 4 years, and I don't want to not talk about that, because like we do it, but it's so hard to document, like, though we did tribal council 3 years ago and 2 years ago and last year.
Well, no, I think that's even better. If you're doing this on an ongoing basis, and that's the gold standard, is that you're doing it you're having discussions and not just doing it every 4 years. Yeah.
Okay.
And there are other places in the planning process to talk about that as well. You know, that might also flow into your monitoring activities or other things that you're doing and informing your priorities as you're moving forward now. So yeah, it's a kind of symbiotic back and forth. So that sounds great. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us again and participating as well. It's great to see you. It's great to be with you. So as I said, we'll look to October 4 as a part 2 on documentation, and we'll see you then. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye, thank you.